Hypnosis works, transforming the mind.
Hi there, I'm Hendrik Baird, a practicing non-medical hypnotherapist currently based in Pretoria, South Africa. I'm always curious to learn more about hypnosis, and so I thought, what better way to learn than to chat with other hypnotherapists to gain some insights into what they do and how they work. So join me as we explore the fascinating world of the mind and of hypnosis. And joining me all the way from Wales today is Angharad Parry. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. How is the weather in Wales?
Changeable. Sometimes sunny and other times really, really wet.
So you've just come out of a session with a client. Tell me, what sort of things do you help people with when you use hypnotherapy?
Sometimes it's easier to think what I don't help people with. I mean, basically, it's anything which is made worse by stress or anxiety. So my last session was with an older gentleman who has got Parkinson's. And it's a particularly interesting area because Parkinson's affects the dopamine production. And so with hypnosis and relaxation, we can promote dopamine production. So we can not make the Parkinson's worse. We can get him operating at his best. But that's fairly more atypical. What I generally help with is anxiety.
It seems to me COVID has also aggravated the anxiety. A lot of people I've been speaking to saying that this has become the number one problem that they're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I write a bit on some of my social media platforms, and I think a lot about this in particular. I think, with COVID for us, with our seasons, summer lockdown was when it happened first off. And it was much easier, people could go out more. There was even a sense that, maybe life would slow down and we could take stock and we would get through this. But then with winter, where people tend to suffer over in this part of the world, more anyway, because, the weather is so bad, it's much harder. You couldn't get out so much, you couldn't see people, and all those sort of celebrations that we enjoy, meeting up, parties, weddings, all of that, those gatherings of people, which we need because we're a really social species. With a year of not having that and the winter, I think it's created a sort of perfect storm for our mental health, really.
Okay, so how long have you been in the hypnotherapy business?
I was thinking about that actually, and I think it must be, actually qualified now for 6 years, but I got into it through hypnobirthing. So I first sort of discovered it must be about 13 years ago now. So trained and qualified, practicing for about 6 years, but practicing it myself for about 13.
Okay, so tell me about the training that you did. Are they training institutes in your country, and how does all of that work to get you to be certified?
Well, yeah, it's quite an interesting, it's an unregulated profession. So you could set yourself up with nothing as a hypnotherapist, but you wouldn't be able to belong to any professional bodies. I've got a diploma in solution-focused hypnotherapy, and the solution-focused bit is particularly important to me. With some people, it was called the Clifton practice, and that was set up by David Newton, who he originally trained as a psychoanalyst, but found that all that sort of negative questioning and looking into the problems wasn't helping anybody, and he was sort of one of the early people in our country here of solution focused work. It was a years-long diploma.
You're saying it's not very regulated in Wales, though in the UK I've heard that there's a lot of regulation and you've got to belong to all sorts of bodies and it's not just for everybody.
No, it's the UK, because Wales, we operate in the UK. No, it's not regulated. It's a choice. If I belong to, three different professional bodies, yes. And if you belong to a professional body, then it's very well regulated. And that's basically why we do it, to keep professional standards up, and to make sure that there's a quality across the board. But if you don't belong to a professional body, you can still practice as a hypnotherapist. There is nothing to say you can't.
Okay, so you were talking about hypnobirthing. Now, I find that extremely interesting, and I have been reading up about that. So that's the way you got into hypnosis. Did you go through a process like that yourself, or was it just an interest that got you through there?
Oh, no, I did it myself. That's what got me into it. I never would have considered hypnotherapy. But when I became pregnant, I suddenly thought back to all those, the classic sort of picture of giving birth, which is, horrible. And suddenly realized that, no, there's no way that I wanted to do that. And I did some research and came across hypnobirthing, and I did a hypnobirthing course and 2 really easy births at home. Second one without a midwife, but that was only because we forgot to call, and which were a complete joy. And it made me realize that so many women have such an awful birth experience, and I really enjoyed it. I just felt that it had been sort of stolen, an experience that's stolen from women. And when my kids were both in school, I decided I wanted to retrain.
That's so interesting, because I've seen a video of somebody doing root canal with just hypnosis, and people around me go like, oh, that must be the worst possible experience. But you look at that person and they seem so calm and relaxed, and and if you talk to women about hypnobirthing, they also go, oh, no, I want the drugs and the whole thing. And like you say, it might be stealing such a valuable and precious experience from a person.
And that's what it felt like. I mean, a colleague of mine actually has posted a video, who is a hypnotherapist, of going through root canal without any pain medication. And it's quite interesting you pick up on that, is that I'll give birth without any pain medication, but I don't think I would be prepared to do root canal without it, which is quite an interesting conundrum in itself. I come from the premise that, our bodies are perfectly designed to birth, and if we understand the process and stop fighting it, then it will be a lot easier. Now, we sort of, in hypnobirthing, it's not so much hypnosis, it's more like dehypnosis. You have to dehypnotize people from the over-medicalized notion of birth. I mean, sure, we do need it sometimes, but I think the figures suggest that it's only in around actually about 5 to 10% of births which may need medical help.
And in this country, doctors seem to do cesarean section first. That is, it looks like a difficult birth, let's do a cesarean. And so many women then lose out on that experience. Is that the same in your country, or are you thinking people are going the more natural route?
No, it's definitely the same in this country. Absolutely. I mean, when I was looking at it, I think the C-section rates were around 25%. And from talking to women who come to me for hypnobirthing now, I think they're well over 30%. So it's on the rise. And there's all sorts of theories as to why, but I think one of the most sort of commonly accepted ones is that basically it's much easier because you book people in, it's tidier, isn't it? Okay, so you're due then, so we'll book you in 10 days beforehand, you'll be in, you'll be out, and then you'll be in recovery. Whereas, giving birth is a spontaneous thing. You go into labor when your body is ready, when the baby is ready, and nobody else knows. Nobody knows when it's going to be. So it's, and nobody knows quite how long it'll be. So it's difficult to manage, Cesarean sections are much easier to manage.
So tell me a little bit about the preparation process. How many sessions would you spend with a lady who is getting prepared for this?
It varies. I mean, I did something called the Mongan method, which was a sort of one of the earliest, and I think probably about the most thorough hypnobirthing courses, and I'm trained by them. But I no longer kept up with their sort of, school, as it were. I tailor make each one to the client. Generally, I will say a minimum of 3 sessions, but 3 hour-and-a-half sessions. But they can have more if they need.
And then are you also there for the birthing process or not?
No. That's a doula's job, really, if they want. But I mean, what I do, the process is really, you want the pregnant lady and their birthing partner, because You can do it by yourself, but if you get into a situation, say you go to a hospital, they are prepared for births as they are used to doing births. And hypnobirthing in a hospital looks very, very different than a birth managed by a hospital. So quite often, the baby will be just about to be born and the staff won't have had any idea of how far along they've got. And panic can ensue then. I mean, in fact, a friend of mine, this is exactly what happened to her. And then just at the last moment, after a lovely, few hours beforehand, they took over. And what we really want is the birthing partner to be there to understand. So they are like a buffer between the mother and all the other medical staff around. So they're being trained to sort of ask the questions. Is this a medical emergency? Is this necessary? Can we wait a bit longer? So that the woman who is giving birth can just be in her zone, in hypnosis, going in and out of hypnosis without people interrupting.
And would this have an effect on the baby in any way?
Well, I don't know, to be fair. Obviously, people who promote hypnobirthing insist that it does. I mean, they say, we have, is it called the APGAR score, that generally babies born in hypnobirthing have a better APGAR score. They tend to breastfeed more readily, more easily. But they also say that for the mother, basically there's much less postnatal depression and a much quicker recovery. I mean, for myself, the word recovery seemed irrelevant. There was nothing to recover from. I mean, that's something I would question. I was up and about, carrying on with my life the next day. And that's the other thing that seems to happen with hypnobirthing in terms of recovery, I think, is that basically you don't, you're probably into hypnobirthing, you hear about tearing a lot. You don't tend to tear with hypnobirthing because you don't push. And that's what causes the tearing. So there's, in terms of recovery, there isn't that to heal from, stitches and all the rest.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Just for interest's sake, if other hypnotherapists are listening to this and want to train or want more information, could you point us in a direction where they could maybe find something out about it? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, but there's lots and lots of people who offer hypnobirthing. The one I would recommend as the go-to would be, and she's an American lady, I think her daughter now runs it, but Marie Mongan. So it's Mongan. Even if you don't want to go and do the course, you can buy their book, online very readily. I think it's called Hypnobirthing for a Gentler, Safer, More Comfortable Birth. And it gives you a lot of detail. It goes into, the history of childbirth, the over-medicalisation of it, and then a Victorian doctor in East London who is kind of like, who discovered the fear, tension, pain syndrome, we call it. The fear of the childbirth creates the tension, and the muscle tension creates the pain, which is why the hypnosis part helps. But yes, Marie Mongan, that's who I would recommend as a go-to.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the business of hypnosis. How busy is your practice? How do you advertise? How do you get clients?
That is such a good question. If you've got any answers, point me to some people who've got the answers. When I finished training, I was still working part-time. I worked part-time in a school and I slowly built up. I did advertising in local magazines. I did lots of leafleting and I put promotional material in cafes and things. And I slowly got a few clients, and then now I get a lot by word of mouth referral. Oh, a friend of mine and so did, and that's generally how it comes. But now I think having a website and keeping on top of that so that you come up high on Google seems to be very important. And I use Facebook and Instagram as sort of little tiny mini blogettes, I guess, sort of musings and thoughts, and a lot of people find me through that. But I think the more effort you put into it, the more results you get, definitely. And I'm not big on promotion.
But certainly it seems like word of mouth is the main way of spreading the message. You have one client that's had a really good experience, then they will certainly talk about it, not so?
Absolutely. And I think as well, I quite often miss word of mouth referrals because I mean, I have, when I first meet people, I take a small history. And my last question is, how did you find me? Because I think it's very important, for a business in terms of growing your business to find out, what is the relevant way to do it. And so, I've had two people this last week. It was like, oh, my father used to be a chain smoker and he was very quiet about it, but I noticed he'd stopped smoking and he told me it was you. Another guy came along through a friend of his who had come to give up drinking. So yes, word of mouth is my favourite, obviously.
Also the cheapest, I'm sure.
Absolutely. But also, and in terms of your ego, it's really good as well. At least you know that what you're doing is, it's doing good. You're helping people. It's working.
In South Africa, there's still a great stigma attached to hypnosis, and especially from religious people going, don't go for it because you'll be possessed by demons and all these weird things. And therefore, people are very hesitant to use it. And yet it's such a great modality. I'm doing some research now around post-traumatic stress disorder. And, the history goes back more than 100 years and through the world wars when people have been treated with hypnosis. Yet it's still last in the queue when people are looking for a way to solve their problems. How is the situation in your country? And do you think we're making progress?
I think we're definitely making progress, actually, because it appears that it seems to be more and more of a normal thing to do. I still find that people come to me and feel a bit weird about approaching a hypnotherapist. So, it's not normalized, as it were, but it's definitely getting that way more and more. I think things like, like PTSD, you're saying, have you come across the MUSS, MUSS rewind technique? And that's something I'm trained in. And that comes from neuro-linguistic programming. And I think what's happening with hypnotherapy is that because we're prepared, most hypnotherapists, to sort of combine anything that works. So I'll take a bit from NLP, and I'm trained in this PTSD technique, which is fantastic, that if it works, it grows, and I think that's what's happening. I mean, the problem we have here is that I don't think the NHS has, the funding or the time really to do the trials that's necessary to be able to say, yeah, right behind hypnotherapy, this is the way forward.
And yet, if you start digging on the internet, there is so much research that deals with various aspects of it, and all of it saying, it works. Why don't we use it much more often? In South Africa, in my practice, people usually say, I'm desperate. I've tried everything else. And now if you can't help me, then I'm giving up. And then usually a session or two later, we've worked through the issue.
Fine. Yeah, I know. And it's incredible how quick it is, isn't it? I mean, and that's what it is so amazing that it isn't more picked up on. And I think, what we have over here is that there is all that research, but it has to be research which fits the sort of, in our country anyway, the NHS's research criteria. And so over here, CBT is, that is the go-to therapy generally, because I'm told, I haven't been told, not researched myself, that CBT was developed by a doctor, and so they followed all the required sort of research for that. All the documentation and research was all in place, so it was very easy for it to be okayed. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. It's so effective. I do. I think it feels to me like the world's best kept secret.
And what I'm hoping is that COVID-19 is going to bring that secret to the fore and make it more accessible for more people. Because I've just written an article around the stress factors of COVID and pandemics in general. And, it seems to me there are so many people that are in need of our services right now that we should, stand on our soapboxes and shout as loudly as we can. Come here, we can help you quickly.
Absolutely. And it would be so nice to be able to get to people sooner. Like you say, I sometimes call myself, not to my clients, the last chance motel, because they've tried everything. We don't see people until they're right at the end of all their options generally. And that seems so sad when, we're so effective.
So how many sessions would you usually spend with a client to work through some of these issues, especially anxiety and those sort of things?
Do you know what? It just varies so much. I have the first meeting I generally have as longer, and I don't use hypnosis because I always think that if you're going to sort of relax and just daydream and drift off in somebody's presence, you need to have met them and maybe know them first. So we get, a good rapport going, and I explain a lot about sort of the neuroscience of things, and also learn a bit about them, so that my hypnosis parts is sort of more fitting to them, so it rings true to them. But I would say for general anxiety, if you sort of get it, as it were, 4 sessions, 3-4 sessions as an average. Some people have had longer. Some people have had 1 or 2.
And it is such an individual process, like you say. Here in South Africa, we talk about client-centered hypnotherapy, that our processes need to be shaped around the client and their needs.
Well, we do solution focused, which is, I don't know if it's quite the same. I mean, it's got to be client-centered, hasn't it? Because if when you're daydreaming away and you're listening to some sort of story and whatever, and things that somebody's saying something to you, you will just block out anything which doesn't really chime with your beliefs or how you feel or what you enjoy. But I'm also trained in solution focused therapy, which is all about getting away from the problem. So people come to you with a problem, and so you acknowledge it and go, yeah, okay, right, I understand that. But what would life look like if it was beginning to get a bit better? What would it look like if you felt a bit more XYZ? And we have to get that from the client. It has to be client-centered, in getting the client to picture, visualize, talk about their solutions. Is that the same sort of thing as you mean?
Yes, I think because there are so many techniques or different techniques that one can use, from regression to metaphor to parts therapy to, there's so many. And you've got to understand your client so that you can fit the kind of technique that you do use to the needs of the client. And if one thing doesn't work, then you've got to be brave enough to try something else, surely.
Absolutely. I don't know much about regression, hypnotherapy and all of that. The basis that my group of people, as it were, come from is that, hypnosis, or the brain function that we go into in hypnosis, is a naturally occurring state. We pop in and out of it all the time. So it's very easy to achieve. The skill, the real skill, I find, is in the psychotherapy part of the session. The first half is, what are your best hopes when you leave here today? If things are better, what would that look like? And getting lots and lots of detail, which sounds quite easy. But when somebody comes to you at the end of the tether and they can't see a way out, it can be quite, sometimes I get lost, and that's when I have to go to my supervisor to get some guidance. I don't know where I'm going with this. But it's that first half I find is the bit I have to adapt more and, be really, really thoughtful about. And the hypnosis part is all about sort of pattern matching to a client's worldview and interests and thoughts and desires and what they need, which, as you probably know, gets easier and easier to do the longer you do it.
Indeed, and you have to rely on your intuition so much sometimes. Just you get a feeling of what the client needs and just go with your gut instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. And go with it. No second guessing, go with it. Yes, I agree.
So you don't do past life regressions and things like that?
No, I don't really know much about it, to be fair.
Okay, because I was speaking to a lady in Ohio just last week, and she was saying so many problems, especially fears and phobias, seem to come from past life experiences. And she uses that technique a lot and then puts those sessions on YouTube so people can see how they work.
That'd be interesting. Just because I don't know something about it doesn't, that's the joy, is you can keep learning. I find, and I suppose the difference there is that problems can come from somewhere. When I'm saying the solution focus bit is really important to me. And we can talk about that and we can look at that, but that's not really the solution. Have you come across, I'm sure, Steve DeShazer and Kim Inso-Berg, who are the people, Palo Alto, who came up with a whole sort of solution focus stuff, which was like, why are people going into therapy for so long? Spending so much money on it and then coming out at the end probably worse, if not no better anyway. And all their research basically showed that if you separate the problem from the solution, you can make change. So, while a problem can be fascinating and you can talk about it, all you're doing is reliving it and treading those neural pathways and keeping on bringing it forward. Whereas if you actually talked about it, say, okay, I acknowledge this, I recognize this. But if there was a miracle and that didn't exist, what might your life look like? And then once you start talking about that, there's natural brain process, the default mode network can start working towards making working towards your preferred futures, if that makes sense.
Indeed, I find a lot of people come and they are so stuck on the problem that they've never looked for a solution. And the moment you point them away from the problem, going, okay, well, that's the problem, that's fine, let's park that here for a moment. But what do you want to achieve? How do you want your life to be in future if this problem had to magically go away? Like you say, it does change people's outlook. And suddenly, I think NLP calls it reframing, that you reframe their lives for them and find a new model or a new map that you can use to go forward in your life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Or even, I mean, what I try to do is I don't, they have to reframe it. I ask the questions, so their solutions come from them, because that hypnotic state, it's like, it's the default mode network, isn't it? It's called like your consciousness is rummaging around in your hippocampus, rearranging your patterns of behavior to solve a problem. So if you create a picture of a preferred future of how you would like it to do when you are in a hypnotic state or daydreaming throughout the rest of your day, the rest of your week, your brain's rummaging around subconsciously, working in the background on your behalf towards that preferred future that you have discussed in your session. It's shoving people off the problem-centric path and onto a track of finding their own solutions, I think, is key.
Work with children.
I do. Much harder. Much more challenging.
I find people say, oh no, that's the easiest thing in the world. I've also find children.
Oh my God, no.
I think it's me, though. It's not necessarily the child that I'm working with. I'm slightly apprehensive somehow. I don't know.
Well, I think what it is that because everybody is different, we're used to adapting for adults. We have an expectation that you have to adapt your language, you have to adapt your concept, we respond. But children, there's the developmental thing as well, isn't there? So I've worked with one 8-year-old who I treated like an adult, the way I spoke. And I've worked with a 14-year-old that I've had to treat like I would have treated, I'd talk to, like a 7-year-old. And then you get other kids who just can't sit still. The idea of, hypnosis, formal hypnosis where you're lying down would just be ridiculous. And so I had this young lad, we were talking throughout the entire session, playing sort of Connect 4. He was going in and out of hypnosis throughout the therapy session. We were creating some crazy sort of space journey where there was this helper and, we were talking about solutions and what might happen and what he would need and going on some crazy mad journey, but whilst playing Connect 4 because there was no way he was going to sit still.
You were saying earlier also that you sometimes connect with a supervisor or somebody who helps you. Do you have a support network of other hypnotherapists that you can share ideas and problems with?
Absolutely. I'm part of 2 professional organisations which are really large, really big ones. So there's the Complementary Natural Health Care, I can't remember, it's very big. And then the National Council of Hypnotherapists, I think. But then there is a much smaller one, which is sort of set up by the people where I trained, which is called the Association for Solution-Focused Hypnotherapy. And that has got a fantastic support network. And then there's the Clinical School of Hypnotherapy, where, yes, it's through Facebook mainly, but there are some really knowledgeable, helpful people. And yes, I have regular supervision. You have to have supervision to belong in these professional bodies. And my supervisor at the moment is both a child psychologist, a GP, a solution-focused trainer, and a hypnotherapist. And she's invaluable. Absolutely.
And how do you keep up with the latest developments? Do you do some continuing education? Do you read? Do you watch videos?
Absolutely. I do more. We have to do, I think it's 15 hours a year of continued professional development for most of the professional bodies. And so I do that. I think the last one I did was a day's one about addiction. It was fascinating, actually, a guy who's really big in addiction stuff in the UK, because I've been seeing more and more people for addiction recently. But yes, I'll do at least 4 training sessions. But there's also Brief, which are the solution focused people. There's loads of free webinars and stuff. So I do quite a lot of those. There's lots and lots, and obviously reading. Yes, plenty of reading.
Perhaps there's been an interesting case, something that stood out or that was unusual that you can maybe tell us a little bit of a story about.
Oh, goodness, I should have thought about that beforehand, shouldn't I? An interesting case. Well, it's kind of interesting, this one. This is a long time ago, but it's one that sticks for me because it had me, when somebody makes an inquiry and you get that feeling of thinking, can I help that person? How am I going to help that person? Oh, okay. So I was quite apprehensive. So a mother approached me. She has a daughter with Down syndrome, and the daughter was, goodness, how old was she? I think she was 14 at the time. And she has had this really bad nervous tic habit, awful, she said, where she was just scratching her forehead and she was scratching it raw. And, could I help her? And I, as always, said confidently over the phone, yes, of course, absolutely. And they booked in. And I was wondering how I was going to manage. It was the summer, and so I thought, trying to keep somebody concentrating, because I know, I've obviously done the research with Down syndrome, lots of concepts, lots of ideas, very hard. There's a processing issue, sensory processing, information processing issue with Down syndrome. So I was just wondering what on earth I was going to do. So we were outside in the garden, sort of chatting, just finding out strengths, weaknesses, what she likes, dislikes, and all of that. And I just thought, what am I going to do when she comes back? I just don't know how to do it. And in the end, I just sat there for an hour making a list together of all the things that were to be gained when she no longer scratched her head. Because when she did turn up and I saw her head, I thought, oh my goodness, the mother should have prepared me for that. It's like her whole forehead was an open wound. It was awful. And it was just that one session. Her mother then called me 2 weeks later and said she hasn't done it since. Just that long list of all the gains to be had was enough. That was a standout for me. It was the one I was most nervous about.
Wow, that's quite an incredible story.
Yeah, no, it stays with me. And there's one other, a hypnobirthing woman. I wish I could remember quite the details. She came to me fertility stuff first and then hypnobirthing. And she wanted her husband wanted her to have a hospital birth, so she did. But she, whilst giving birth, I can't remember what kind of scanner she ended up in. She ended up being scanned and finding out that she had a problem herself with, would it have been her heart? I can't remember what exactly. But all around her, the staff were just going, I can't believe this. You're so calm. You're giving birth and you're finding out you've got, you've got health issues yourself. What's going on? I think that's one of my favourite hypnobirthing stories. The birth was completely secondary.
A lot of people I've been speaking to have also been saying, in the past, it's been very old school. Your client comes in, they sit in your chair, you work with them and they go. Maybe you do a group or two. But COVID has changed the way we deliver our hypnosis sessions. And a lot of people are finding great success using a platform like Zoom. Is that your experience too?
Absolutely. I love it. I may never put proper shoes on again. Life in slippers is the way forward, isn't it? And it's really, I had a really interesting chat with my supervisor about it, because we're talking nearly a year ago now, aren't we? We were asking people how they were finding it and how they were adapting. And I was saying, I think people are having less sessions. I think they are requiring less sessions. What's going on? Why is it? And the theory that we've come up with, and I'm going with it because I like it, there's no proof, is that, when people come to you in that formal setting and they come into your room or your house or your practice or whatever it is you're going from, they're coming to an alien space. Sometimes they can get there and they can get everything and they leave and everything's fine and hunky-dory, and then they get back to their own life and they go back to those old patterns. They go back to that, autopilot, subconscious thing. But I have this hunch that when you are what I call beamed live and direct into their life, what is happening, these changes that are happening, there's no excuse for the brain to reject anything because it's into the context of their own life. And I just wonder if context is possibly much more important than we ever thought.
What about the technicalities of a screen flipping and you're looking up somebody's nose, or the connection cutting out in the middle? How do you manage that?
Connection cutting out in the middle is really irritating. I don't find that, I don't know about my clients, but for me, I don't have any problem with the screen thing. I mean, I do get some people who it's like, you're not going to try and hold that phone, are you, whilst you're in hypnosis? No, let's put that down. Oh, why? It's like, well, because you've got to hold it. I want your muscles relaxing. But yeah, bad internet can be an issue. And so I always have to preface all Zoom sessions saying, right, if your internet cuts out, if my internet cuts out, don't worry, I'll try to reconnect. If it doesn't work, I'll just call you up and we'll arrange another time. But yeah, no, I apart from bad internet, I don't really think there's a downside, to be fair. I think it's a plus for client and therapist.
And also, it might take away the stress of driving to your practice. And as you say, it's a weird, unknown space, and
yeah,
it is more familiar at home. So that's an interesting theory. I'll check with other hypnotherapists too and see if they agree with that. That's really interesting.
I thought it was quite interesting. I mean, I do remember early days when I had. I always used to insist that smoking cessation was one big long session. Now I'm much more fluid and flexible. And I remember one guy coming along, and throughout the hypnosis part, I could see his hand clenched lying there, and he wasn't relaxed. He was going, "Was that it? Was that it?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah." You could see the coming to a different place, meeting a new person, going through a new process was all quite anxious making.
I had a client once, and she had several fears and phobias, and she was so scared of even the house that I stayed in. She was like, "This is such a creepy house. I'm not sure I can even come in here." So I can see the benefits of doing it live, beaming live into your brain where you are.
Yeah, exactly. I had this lovely guy at the beginning of lockdown, this lovely woman, and her husband was off working, and it was after her kids had gone to bed, and she said, "Can I just do it in bed, and then just don't bother getting me to come round?" And we just, if you wanted another session, we'd arrange it beforehand, and then I'd finish the session, switch off, and let her be.
Do you find it works best sitting up in a chair or lying down when you're doing a Zoom?
I don't think it matters. I just ask people to get comfortable. If they want a blanket, to get a blanket. I do think there was one woman who was doing it in a chair, and I said, "Come on, your head's not supported. Are you sure you're comfortable?" But again, it's client-centered. If they say they're comfortable, then I feel that I have to go with it.
And does that also mean that you are starting to see people from around the globe and not just in your immediate vicinity?
That's very interesting, isn't it? Because I did this course sort of, a few months into lockdown about, taking your practice online and blah, blah, blah. And this was one of the great highs of it, was that we could be practicing around the globe. No, I haven't. Lots of my colleagues have had more inquiries from around the globe, but I would think that that's probably down to my promotion and marketing. I haven't put any effort into trying to find people around the globe, but it would be, very interesting.
Well, I certainly hope this podcast would make you more well-known around the
globe. You never know. Do you work around the globe more, or do you just work locally?
I have only recently come back into hypnosis. I took a break for about 2 years, and having done some other things and studied some more and do all sorts of other things. So for me, it's a brand new world, really. And I was still old school until about 2 weeks ago when somebody said, "No, you must go online." And this is, in fact, the first online Zoom interview that I've been doing. So far, it's all been through WhatsApp calls. So this is also a newbie for me.
You see, I find Zoom very useful because you've got things like, you can do drawings. You've got the whiteboard, so you can explain things on there. And if you've got groups, you've got breakout rooms. And it's pretty good. Yeah.
You're talking about things I still don't know about. So I'll have more research.
Well, I sound like I do, but I think maybe I don't.
Okay, so if people wanted to book your services or get hold of you, how would they do that? How would they find you?
You can find me on, I have a website which is called Abergavenny, which is the town where I live, abergavennyhypnotherapy.co.uk. I have a Facebook page called Parry, P-A-R-R-Y, Parry Hypnotherapy, and the same again on Instagram. And my email address is info@parryhypnotherapy.com. Yeah, and I'm always happy to have a chat, a free informal chat to find out more, because like you say, it's quite often a last chance and people don't know much about it and quite often can feel quite nervous. So, just ringing up and having a chat is never a problem.
Well, there we go. Give Angharad a chat there in Wales. A beautiful, warm-hearted woman with a beautiful voice. I'm sure you're a fantastic hypnotherapist. I wouldn't mind going through a session with that beautiful voice in my ear.
I think maybe we could arrange some reciprocal hypnotherapy.
Wouldn't that be fantastic? Yes. Okay, so the description of the podcast will have all of the contact details. Make sure you look in there. And thank you so much for your time and chatting with me today.
Absolute pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Well, I found chatting to my hypnosis colleague very interesting and insightful, and I trust that you did too. Their contact details are in the podcast description, or you can get in touch with them through findahypnotist.co.za. If you want to find out more about me and what I do, please visit my website, hendrikbaird.com. Remember, I release new episodes every Thursday, so be sure to subscribe to my channel. Until we speak again, have a hypnotic day.
Hypnosis works, transforming the mind.